So I just wanted to do a hopefully quick video on the subject of the yellow slash white sun, and specifically pose a question to NASA about it. This is an article from Stanford, I'll link it below, which kind of gives the official narrative that is out there today, stating it is a common misconception that the sun is yellow or orange or even red. However, which are the colors that we all are used to seeing, the sun being. However, the sun is essentially all colors mixed together, which appears to our eyes as white. This is easy to see in pictures taken from space. And then to the left here, there is this image courtesy of NASA, which shows the sun from space. I think this is the ISS that supposedly took this picture. And you can see that the color of the sun from space and just the general view of it is identical to the view of it that we see on the ground from Earth now, which is this blinding white star. And many people, like myself, have really become suspicious of this because we remember the sun being yellow. And whoops, we'll get to that one. A little too early for that. This is a picture of the sun from the science fiction film Logan's Run, which came out in 1976. And this is the marker for those who are interested in where I got it from, 1/12/27. And you can see the kind of deep yellow nature of the sun. Now, I have to say, I don't know if they somehow use special effects to create this sun, but in the context of the movie, it really seems like it was just a legit picture outside of the sun that they took. I mean, I've looked for information and it's just too hard to find whether that's the case or not. So I'm going to assume that this is an actual picture of the sun from 1976. And the reason that I have to resort to showing a picture like this is because all of this information has been scrubbed from the internet. It's nearly impossible to find pictures from the 70s or 60s that actually show the sun. And they've even gone to the extent of replacing images of the sun in old footage. And I've seen this take place in over Thanksgiving. I was visiting my family, and they were watching NFL Network, and there's a show called A Football Life, and they kind of just highlight old players that played back in the day, and and newer. In any event, that's neither here nor there. But there are actual images from supposedly 2 or 3 years ago that show, or not 2 or 3 years ago, but from the 90s that where they have replaced this version of the sun with a just obviously fake implanted with CGI sun. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there. So the official narrative now from NASA is that this has always been the color of the sun from space, and for a variety of reasons we perceive it with our eyes from the ground as yellow, red, or orange, right? Depending on if it's a sunrise, sunset, or in the middle of the day. And this article just kind of goes on to talk about the visible spectrum of light and why that is the case. And then this is another article from Astro Bob, What Color is the Sun, from August 26, 2012. And I'll link this below too, but there is a interesting analysis here where he says this loss of blue and violet to the sky causes the sun to look yellow or warmer than it should. If we could peer out the cupola windows of the space station at a sun unfiltered by the atmosphere, it would appear its natural color, glaring white. So again, we have this same narrative that is coming out of NASA and all of the prestigious institutions of our day, like Stanford, saying, yeah, sure, it looks yellow because of the atmosphere that the light is scattered through. However, it's actually really white in space, right? And then this this image here kind of goes into that, where he says around noon, sunlight takes, and this is the noon sun, sunlight takes a short direct path through the atmosphere and appears pale yellow, right? And that they try to use to explain the paler color of the sun when we view it from the ground at noon versus the more red orange version of the sunset or sunrise that we view standing on Earth from this angle, because again, he says the long path, when near the horizon around sunset and sunrise, the light passes through the lower, dirtier part of our atmosphere the entire distance. All that extra dust, smoke, etc. effectively scatter much of the sun's light, leaving only orange and reds. So that's kind of the new official explanation for why the sunrise and sunset are generally deeper orange and reds than the noon sun or the afternoon sun, right? Anywhere from like 1 to 4 before it begins to set, depending on whether it's winter or summer, right? That time will be different. So my question for NASA, though, based on this information, I mean, and we'll get more into this a little bit later, but Apollo 8 was the second manned mission in the United States Apollo space program, launched on December 21st, 1968, becoming the first manned spacecraft to leave Earth orbit, reach the Earth's moon, orbit it, and return safely to Earth. Apollo 8 took 3 days to travel to the moon. It orbited 10 times over the course of 20 hours, during which the crew made a Christmas Eve television broadcast, blah, blah, blah. So the mission duration was 6 days, 3 hours, and 42 minutes. And this is supposedly, again, the first time that any human, had been into space, as we are told space is, and seen the sun with their own eyes for the first time. This is an Apollo flight journal from Apollo 8. And this is, so astronaut Borman says, we're on the PTC mode now, waiting for Jim, and I noticed that out my window now I can see Orion very clearly, even though the sun is bright in the other window. And then below, Borman says, well, I can see the sun. So hopefully you can see the logical question that arises here, which is, if the sun has always been a glaring, bright white light in space when it is not filtered and scattered by our atmosphere, if that is the case, then wouldn't this astronaut Borman have immediately recognized that when he and the other astronauts first saw that in space? And would they not have come back to Earth after those 6 days in space? And that would have been, would it not, one of the first things that they would have said, like, hey, look at the sun right now, that, like, right when they came out of the shuttle, right? And they're in the, I don't remember if the Apollo 8 landed on a runway, or if they did one of those things where they supposedly land in the ocean in their little pod, right? But he would have come out and been like, oh my gosh, look at how the sun is yellow right now. I don't know what time of day it was, right? But look at the sun, it's yellow. You wouldn't believe what color it is in space. It's totally white, right? That would have been would that not have been one of the first things that they said? And yet it is, it was never conventional wisdom or, just common knowledge after that point that, oh yeah, well, we might see it as yellow, but the sun's actually white. Did you guys, yeah, that's a common thing we stupid humans do. But, we're so smart, we got out of low Earth orbit, or I have such problems saying that phrase, low Earth orbit, and we saw the sun in space and it's actually white. But of course, that is not what happened. That was never conventional wisdom. And indeed, anybody listening to this will be able to confirm that we were never taught that. And we all went around just thinking that the sun was yellow, right? And you can see that in, again, going back to the sun from Logan's Run. And then also, this is Superman 1 in 1978. So this is 1976, this is 1978. And this is obviously a special effects crew that put this together. But the point is that this is the color of the sun from the ISS that we have recently been provided, and it is this white sun that conveniently looks exactly like the sun does from Earth now. And yet, 10 years after an astronaut supposedly saw this real sun, the makers of Superman 1 are giving us this yellow sun in space, presumably because we all saw the sun as yellow from the ground, and that would be the only thing that made sense to anyone alive at the time, right? Same thing with Logan's Run. So the natural response to that will be going back to this article that was talking about the different paths through the atmosphere, and they'll say today that explains why you see the different shades of yellow that you do. The problem, of course, is that this is a picture that I took a couple months ago of a sunrise, and you can see that it's a clearer sky. So again, their argument would be, this was kind of a rare, clear sunrise, and their argument would be, well, yeah, there was no atmosphere there, so you got this brighter version of the sunrise than normal. And but even saying that, you can see a trail in the background here. I mean, come on, it's still right. There's still the fake persistent contrail atmosphere in play here. So the point being that you can see how it is a much brighter sunrise in 2016 that matches the much brighter noon sun that is totally contrasted with the images that we just saw from Logan's Run and Superman, where the sun is yellow. And then, of course, this is from 1989, or 1987. This is Superman 4. And again, so 1968 to 1989, that's a good 20 years. And still, it has not become common knowledge enough to where the makers of this franchise are putting the sun as the supposed real color that it is in space, which is this color right here. Again, we get this version. And what really should blow your mind is that this movie was made in 1987, and then Back to the Future Part 2 was made in 1989, and only 2 years removed from Superman, we don't get this yellow sun portrayed. In the year 2015, when Marty and Doc Brown and they go to the future, right? In the year 2015, we get this white sun they show us, right? And it's the same as the sun we see from space. They don't give us a yellow sun. Now, does that make any sense whatsoever if we're going with the idea that, well, the sun was always white in space, but yeah, even if we take like a common sense, whitewashed answer of, well, yeah, we all see it, as yellow from where we're at. So of course the movies are going to put it as yellow too, just so it makes people feel comfortable and they don't ask questions, right? But if that was the case, Back to the Future would have done the same thing. And yet, what do? They give us the sun that we would be seeing at the time, or they give us the sun that we would be seeing now in 1989. Like, it's the year 2015 they are portraying, and they give us the real sun that we'll actually be seeing in 2015. So I think the question that it's kind of if you've listened to, if you go check out the video titled Time, Scalar Reality, and then there's a bunch of other titles in there about mental time travel and our perception of time, right? If you go back to that video, I think this is kind of a similar thing taking place here, where I was discussing I mean, at the beginning of the video, I do discuss kind of this idea of the Blu-ray, right? And how the sun could, well, I'll wait and hold on to that. Just to go into the analogy to to what I was talking about with time there, a year to a 1 year old is going to seem like a much longer period than a year to someone who was 55, right? They've had 55 of those years. So by default, they're going to perceive that next year as a much shorter period of time than the 1 year old is going to perceive their next year to when they're two, right? There's just that dichotomy there between a younger person and an older person. And that is kind of a relativity of the perception of time there. But if if you postulate the concept that the perception of time has been altered for, because due to a change in the structure of reality itself, it's been altered for everyone that perceives time, who has an awareness incarnated in that reality. Well, then the fact that there is that relativity between a young person and an older person doesn't negate the fact that there has been a change for all perceivers of that are in a stream of consciousness, right? That are perceiving time as an element of this reality. And so I bring that up to say that I think there is a similar thing taking place here with the color of the sun, and they're obviously related if you go with the hypothesis that, well, okay, has the sun changed its resonant frequency, and thus is it being perceived by us as resonating at a higher vibration and thus a different color? So if you go with that, you can say, okay, well, as depicted in these pictures here, yeah, sure, when the sunrise or the sunset is taking place, you get a deeper yellow, orange, red than you do when it's the noonday sun, because the light from the sun is going through more atmosphere to your vision at this level, making it scatter more wavelengths and thus leaving only the infrared spectrum, or not only, but less of the rest of the spectrum for your eyes to perceive. And that's why it's more yellow, orange, or red versus the noonday sun, where the light's coming directly down at a shorter path through the atmosphere, and thus less of the light is scattered and you perceive more of the ultraviolet spectrum. So sure, that like the age difference relativity will apply to the perception of time. Sure, this the difference in the length of the wavelengths is going to change the color that we are perceiving. However, that doesn't mean that the color itself has shifted an octave, right? And is necessarily brighter across all scales. So that's my, kind of the question that I would pose to NASA or anyone else who wants to take a stab at it here. If the astronauts of Apollo 8 actually saw the sun from space and that became, common knowledge, then why is it only now that it's being promoted that the sun was always white, which is a convenient development considering this is how the sun looks now, right? And of course, you could go with an alternative theory that it is the persistent contrail program that is, because that would play into that hypothesis as well, right? That they would say, or not hypothesis, that would play into that explanation that this Astro Bob is giving, like, okay, of course, they would probably never admit to that, but if you say that the atmospheric change that results from the persistent contrail program has changed the way that the light from the sun is scattered through that atmosphere, and thus it changed the color. So sure, you could make that argument as well, that it is the change in the atmosphere that is actually affecting the color. And sure, the sun's always been white from space, or has always been perceived as pure white in space, but it was just the atmosphere was so different in the 70s that it was coming through as this deep yellow, that you can see like this portrayed in those movies that we all remember. And then it's kind of like just a simple explanation, like, well, yeah, that's what we all saw, so that's what they put in the movies. Still, I'd love to hear from NASA as to why we never heard from any of the astronauts from Apollo 8 on that the sun was this white color in space. And it's only now, post 2012, where the phenomena has really taken off, that we're hearing this explanation that the sun has always been white. And of course, a third idea would be, well, we've never actually been outside of low Earth orbit, and we don't really have any good idea what the sun is from space to begin with. That nobody's ever been out there anyway, and we don't even know what space is, and all of this is just total bunk. So I'm just kind of posing this as an open question here. I'd love to hear a plausible, of course they'll never address me directly because this is a blackballed subject and no one talks about the white sun. No one talks about potential changes to the structure of reality as being perceived by this change in the sun, and how it might represent a change on the cosmic scale of cycles, just like we have seasonal cycles. This could represent a change on the cosmic scale that really, would go to a lot of these ancient traditions that we're talking about 2012 as a year where a shift was going to occur. And it just so happens that this shift in the sun has really escalated, even though you can find articles going back to like 2003. It just so happens that in the years leading up to 2012 and then directly thereafter till 2017 that we're in now, the sun has undergone this radical change. So I don't know. I just think it's an interesting question that we need to talk about, and no one connected to the alternative media talks about it, outside of like very rare conversations on message boards. But those are, that's all from people like me and, most likely people that are viewing this video that are just on the total fringe of all this. And, we're never going to get acknowledged, for a blackballed subject. But I'm going to try to keep to my promise of making this a shorter video. And I'll just end it here and see if we get any sort of response on this question. So take it easy, and hopefully I'll be a little more active in the next couple months while I got some time.